Well, welcome back everybody. I hope you managed to make a dent in that vast array of pastries outside. There was quite a lot, I think. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Our next focus, we have an individual speaker, and then after that there's a panel discussion with panel 3. So, first of all, we're going to invite Garry Connelly to come and talk to us. He is the Environment Delegate to the International Automobile Federation, and he is going to talk to us about how motorsport is taking a leading edge in sustainability. Garry, please.
Good morning everyone, and thank you very much for the organising committee for the invitation. It's an honour to be here with you. I am going to try and speak English, being from Australia. It might be a little bit hard for some of you. I understand we do have a few Antipodeans and Antipodeans in the crowd, so welcome to my fellow Australians. I guess I should start off by saying what the FIA is. The FIA is the world governing body for automobiles of 4 wheels or more. We have colleagues represented here in the FIM who cover motorcycle racing, and I must say they are doing an excellent job in the world of sustainability. I guess our journey towards sustainability started more than 2 decades ago when our then president decided to look at carbon offsetting the carbon footprint of the World Rally Championship. And this was quite groundbreaking at the time, as you can imagine, 20 odd years ago. We've moved on from there, but really it's only in the last decade that we've started to become very proactive in the sustainability world. And you've got to get the next slide up, there we go. You don't really need to read the tea leaves to understand that there's a very clear message coming from all directions. We had COP in Marrakesh this year. We have a great influence of the Greens in parliaments across the globe, and we also have NASA's climate trend predictions. But irrespective of climate change, there has been, happily to say, in motorsport an acceptance that motorsport does pollute and that human beings pollute. So we have always been able to take steps which we feel have given us an advantage, really, where you might think that a sport, a dirty sport like motorsport, might find difficult. We formed several years ago the FIA Action for Environment campaign. It's one of our 2 major pillars. We have the FIA Action for Road Safety and the FIA Action for the Environment. It's all part of the FIA being seen as a good corporate citizen in the world. It's part of what we want to do. And our Action for Environment has really 2 pillars: measure and improve, which I'll talk about later, and innovate and promote. And it's the innovation area that we feel we can play the greatest role in. Because unlike many other sports, our sport and its innovation is actually transferable to everyday life far more than other sports. And unlike government, which is always reluctant to act because of the politics of being re-elected, in motorsport we've tended to be lucky in that we can use the power of our regulations to say, you must do this. So we want to use our regulations to say, you must innovate. We use our regulations to encourage, and we use our regulations to write technical specifications that are transferable not only to other vehicles, to road-going vehicles, but to the world, society in general. And basically what we're saying to people is, look, it's our game. If you want to come and play, you play under our rules. And this is a wonderful advantage, and I'll give you some examples in just a moment. The first one actually relates to the World Endurance Championship. Now, most of you will not have heard of that, but you certainly would have heard of Le Mans, famous 24-hour race in France. And it's part of a series of events that form now the World Endurance Championship. And when they established the rules, the FIA with the automobile club that runs the Le Mans event, they established 5 basic principles. And one of those, the first one, was the reduction of fossil energy consumption. So they did that by creating, in the open category, those beautiful cars that you see at Le Mans and elsewhere around the world, they opened them up to innovation and said, the more energy that you recover that would normally be wasted, the more advantage you will get. And we had 3 manufacturers at the time, Audi, Toyota and Porsche, who all adopted a different strategy because the regulations allowed them to. And they harvested energy. Now we're going to talk about this quite a lot today because this is so critical to the world going forward, to harvesting that wasted energy that goes off into the atmosphere. Audi adopted a flywheel energy storage system through kinetic energy recovery. And they're harvesting 2 megajoules per lap of Le Mans. Toyota went a different approach. They used a supercapacitor to store energy that was recovered from kinetic energy. So in other words, using what is effectively a generator in reverse as a brake. So that when the car's under braking, it's generating electricity and turning it around the other way into an electric motor to add power to the internal combustion engine. And they were harvesting 6 megajoules per lap. Whereas Porsche went with 2 systems, kinetic energy recovery and heat energy recovery. Heat energy recovery through the exhaust and the turbo. And they harvested 6 megajoules a lap. And they stored it using a lithium-ion battery. So all of these different technologies forcing innovation, and the reason that the manufacturers are doing it is simply why? Because they want to win. Because winning Le Mans sells cars. Winning the championship sells cars. So they're prepared, because we've regulated for innovation, they're prepared to spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year innovating on technology that they probably otherwise might not spend. So that's a big way that motorsport is actually setting an example that we believe other sports can do. Then we go to Formula One. Now, a few years ago, Formula One was running a V8 engine, very noisy, using a lot of fuel, against great opposition from the teams. The FIA said, no, we're going to a V6 turbocharged energy recovery efficient power unit. And this power unit has ended up delivering more horsepower using 30% less fuel, with speeds the same, if not, we'll see in a few weeks the first race in Australia, speeds probably faster than ever before. I'm not going to bore you with the details, but there are actually 7 different energy journeys. Going back 20 years, there was one energy journey in a racing car. It was from the engine, right back through the gearbox, into the wheels, and that drove the car. Now there are 7 different energy journeys in that power unit. And I'm going to focus on just 2, number 4 and 5. So there's a recovery system in the turbo of the Formula One car power unit, that recovers energy when the turbo is spinning. And that's one of the reasons why the sound of the Formula One cars is not as loud as what it used to be, because a lot of that noise is being taken up in the recovery of energy. And that energy flows from the turbine back into a battery. We'll talk about batteries in a moment. Then, if you look at energy journey number 5, when the driver wants to accelerate, not only does he put his foot on the accelerator, it's all fly-by-wire. It says to the computer, right, we want more fuel going into the engine. At the same time, it says to the battery, I want you to pump electricity that you stored from the turbine. I want you to pump that into the electric motor that's attached, and I want you to add to the power that's coming from the internal combustion engine. Does that make sense? As a result of the 760 horsepower that's generated, they say it's probably more than that, that's the disclosed amount, that's being generated by this power unit, 181 horsepower is being created by what was previously wasted energy going off into the atmosphere. Is that good? It's fantastic. Why? Because the engine manufacturers, Mercedes, Ferrari, Honda, Renault, they make production cars. And I can assure you that they don't put 400 engineers at the factory just working on the power unit just to use on Formula One. They're going to apply all that technology to the cars that you are going to be buying in the very near future. Already, you're getting hybrid cars. The hybrids of the future will be even more radical and more efficient and less energy consuming than today. I forget which speaker it was, it might have been Alan, that talked about using people as role models. Every driver in modern motorsport actually gets sustainability. Why? Because they're driving sustainable cars. And the FIA's approach in forcing this innovation is to set an example. Because we know that we can make hybrids, which people previously thought were for old fuddy-duddies driving around. We can force young people to think, well, these are pretty sexy, because Lewis Hamilton drives one, Mark Webber drives one, Fernando Alonso drives one. So we can use our sport as a role model to encourage people to use sustainable energy vehicles. For example, innovation. Honda is one of our accredited sustainability partners, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. They innovate constantly. They're constantly innovating. They don't just start work in December for a car in March. As it says there, every 17 minutes of the season, they were doing an upgrade on their vehicle, a technical upgrade, be it on the power unit or be it on the aerodynamics of the car. Aerodynamics, extremely important when it comes to energy efficiency. And a lot of the cars that you see, the design of them now, they use that same philosophy. So a lot of what is learned here, it's transferred to the road-going car. Things like brakes, oils, and so on. Then we come to the jewel in the crown, and we have Julie from Formula E here, and I think Formula E was mentioned 3 times already today. This is the first FIA championship to be totally electricity driven, and it's a wonderful, wonderful formula run in the centre of major cities throughout the world. Very exciting racing. At the moment, I don't think many people are aware, but instead of a driver stopping to change tyres or to refuel, they stop and change cars. So every driver has 2 cars. Why? Because of battery life. So to complete the race, they need to change cars partway through the race. Now, from the season starting at the end of 2018, we're moving to 1 car per driver. Logical. Impossible up to now. Why? Because the battery storage capacity was not there. Now it is, or it's going to be. I'm a member of the FIA World Motorsport Council, so I get to vote on these things, and we voted at our last meeting, which was December, for season 18-19, Formula E, one battery, one car. So what does that mean? They have to now innovate and get a battery that will take the car for the duration of the race. This is a great thing, not just for Formula E, it's more important for society. Why? Because it means that electric cars will have greater range. What's the biggest criticism of electric cars at the moment? Driver range, right? But it not only has the ability to work in automobiles, it has far-reaching effects on society. In our country, there's a state called South Australia who's gone very much towards renewable energy. Unfortunately, we had a complete blackout there recently, simply because the wind didn't blow, the sun didn't shine. It should have come to live in my state in Queensland where it's also always sunshine. But the reason it failed was because when it didn't rain, when it rained and didn't have sunshine, and when the wind didn't blow, they didn't have capacity to store the energy that they previously recovered. So with proper battery innovation, we see that there's going to be a great contribution to society to store the energy that can be collected from a renewable source. A couple of more examples of the transfer of technology. Top left-hand corner, you'll see Kimi Räikkönen. He won the Belgian Grand Prix, I think that was 2009, through an overtaking move using kinetic energy recovery on the car. It's the first time really that someone had won a Grand Prix using that energy recovery system. And now here we see the new Volvo with very, very similar characteristics of energy recovery. The Williams Formula One team developed a kinetic energy recovery system using its flywheel system for London buses. So they installed these on a number of London buses and they're getting a very, very significant energy saving on those. So that's direct transfer of technology, and we talked about the transfer of technology in Formula E to other cars and to society in general. Going back to our other pillar, we talked about how we set an example through innovation. We also measure and develop strategies for the environment. The FIA has developed an amazing accreditation system. We're not aware of it in any other sport. What we do is we encourage all our stakeholders. Now these can be circuit owners, Formula One teams, racing categories like Formula E, which is accredited, car clubs, people who are suppliers to the sport, to become accredited to an environmental standard that is world class. And we have 4 publications that we issue. The first one is a set of guidelines that says what it is that you need to achieve to be accredited. It's a very, very extensive resource document. The man who was responsible for designing the whole program, Evan Weir, is here today. The second document basically tells them how to do it in your organisation, and we offer help to do that. So a car club in Barbados, a circuit owner in Spain, or a large Formula One team like McLaren has that pathway. Third document is the checklist, where you actually go through what you need to do and how you are performing, and you get a certain level of accreditation, be it gold, silver, bronze, it used to be, we've got other words for it now, to get to the top level of accreditation. And the final document is a very, very good tool for measuring your carbon footprint accurately online with assistance from outside sources, reputable outside sources, one of whom is here with us today, and then offsetting, so the organisations can simply calculate the carbon footprint, go online and offset that footprint. And this is remarkable because of the take-up we've had We've got car clubs. We've got Circuit of Catalunya in Spain, fully accredited at the top level. The World Rally Championship has to be accredited. We regulated that they had to be accredited because we saw rallying as an organisation that could be, a sport that could be very subject to criticism. And McLaren Formula One team is fully accredited at the top level. So this is a great tool and something we think is world class as far as a sporting organisation is concerned. And finally, to promote, our federation is made up of 132 national federations. They meet annually at Sports Conference Week. We did a survey and we asked them, amongst other things, how concerned are you about sustainability? And what percentage of what would you like the FIA to do even more to help you? 98% said yes, they were concerned about sustainability and they wanted help to get there. One of the reasons for this, and it applies to all sports, is that sport is not sustainable without assistance from government and the commercial sector. When you used to go and approach a sponsor to sponsor an event, to sponsor a car, they used to ask about exposure. Nowadays, what are the boards asking about? They're asking about risk management and they're asking about sustainability, the environment. We believe we are helping our sport by giving them the tool to take that initiative. And with that, I leave you. Thank you. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Garry. Some fascinating stuff there. For someone who's not really followed Formula One, I learned some really interesting things. I think that most intrigued me was how, through the governing body, you've set rules with a sustainability component in it, which then the team, the manufacturers have to follow. And my head's racing, thinking how other sports might, through some of the equipment, do a similar thing to drive such innovation. I suppose sports like sailing might be an obvious one. Not all of them necessarily could do it, but it's a fascinating thing, and that really would be something talking to the top-down targets that we were discussing earlier. That's fascinating. One quick question there for me is, you've mentioned all those tools, the management tool and the carbon footprint thing. Are those open source, or are they very much within Formula One? I mean, is this something that can be shared?
Subject to what Evan says, I think they are, yes.
So that would be really good, because it's one of the frustrations sometimes with reinvention of the wheel. And if we can bring together some of the good practice already done and see how that can transfer to other sports. And on accreditation, there is a similar, maybe, program with the Gulf Environment Organisation, which maybe you don't know about. Kelly, who is here somewhere, Kelly, over there. Your team, you can talk to her. We haven't really got time for questions. Does anyone have a question? Or something I can think of? No, perhaps not. So, Garry, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. We'll get very well. Thank you. So, where are my star performers for the next piece? We are moving on now to a panel session on the game changer, leaving a mega sports event legacy. Can the three speakers come up onto the hot seats, please? And I'll introduce you as you get settled. So here we're really looking at the growing importance of sustainability as a sort of long-term perspective for sports events. And we have with us Niclas from the UNFCCC, which is a long acronym, let's say it before. We have Tania Braga, who is the head of Legacy at the International Olympic Committee, which is of course a very new role, Tania, and best known to many of us perhaps as the former head of Sustainability, Accessibility and Legacy at Rio 2016. And I might just say on the side, Tania, a big congratulations to you and your team, because I know you put a lot of effort and work in, and while the media doesn't always pick up on these things, those of us who do know, there were some really important advances done in Brazil through your work. And in a similar time frame, we also have Neil Beecroft, who recently was the sustainability manager at UEFA and was responsible for taking the Euro 2016 football tournament through the whole sustainability programme, and both Rio 2016 and the Euro were certified to the ISO 2012-1 standard. So big congratulations to you guys too for that. So I'll turn first to Niclas just to give a brief introduction about your point of view as someone outside the world of sport looking in, and the need for it to have more of a social license to operate. I think that's the theme you're going to take. Just take one of them.
Okay, this is perfect. So, good morning everybody. Really a pleasure to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Niclas Svenningsen. I'm working for UNFCCC. We call ourselves Climate Change Secretary because we must keep track of all the C's in our acronyms. Anyway, the UNFCCC is the organization within the United Nations that is responsible for trying to get their member states to agree on anything about climate change. And after more than 20 years of negotiations, we actually had this Paris Agreement a little bit more than a year ago, which is essentially a blueprint for how we as a global society are going to address climate change. It is an agreement between 196 countries, which is impressive. Getting them to agree on anything is quite impressive. Not all governments are easy to work with. Some governments come, some governments go. But it is very well founded, and we have full confidence that regardless of any current political dimensions, this is going to go ahead as planned. The Paris Agreement is basically an agreement between governments, but it's also an agreement for all sectors of society. Very obviously, nobody would argue that transport or energy or waste management is not part of it, because it is. Same thing goes for sport. Sport is also not explicitly mentioned, but we are all included in this. Why sports? Why is sport important? Well, first of all, just to get rid of our own climate footprint in the sports area. Mega events typically have a climate footprint of a couple of million tons. How much is that, you may ask? Well, it's about the same climate footprint, annual footprint of a small country. Fiji is the presidency of our COP this year, and they have a climate footprint of about 2 million. I think FIFA World Cup or Olympics typically have 2-3 million. So this is important. Secondly, and more important for us, is actually that sports has the largest audience in the world. And I am absolutely delighted to hear about all the good work that is going on, but I also think that the billions of people that are looking at your sports events, they don't have a clue about what you're doing. And until they know what you're doing, we are not doing a good enough job. So this conference is a perfect topic to have here. And thirdly, I think, the legacy of this kind of events, big and small ones, but large ones in particular, they should not only be seen as a one-time occasion, we have some fun together and then we leave, but it should really be something that is building the ability of the local community to address their climate issues in a long time. In UNFCCC, the Climate Change Secretariat, we have an initiative we call Climate Neutral Now. We are working with companies, organizations, cities, and individuals to do three things: measure your footprint, what you're doing, reduce it as much as possible, and we will reduce, offset it. Get rid of it by investing in emission reduction somewhere else. So companies such as FIFA are already part of this. Adidas is one of our champions, but many, many more of you we have been talking with, and really looking forward to you joining us on this. Why is climate neutrality important? Well, because the Paris Agreement says we have to stay below 2 degrees Celsius. And science tells us that the only way we can do that is by having a climate neutral planet in the second half of this century. So it means that certainly we'll still have greenhouse gas emissions, but we also have things, forests and oceans, that we need to preserve so that we have a balance in the equation here. So, just to round off this little introduction, mega sports events is the theme for this session. Why are they important? Well, they are the ones that really shape the face of sports. it is about teamwork, it's about excellence, it's about working together to reach a goal. And that is where our organizers are getting the impression of what sports really is about. And this is also where we have the opportunity to reach out and to show what we're doing and tell everybody that they can also be part of the solution. So it's not only about the more right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do, and it's really the license to operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Niclas. So Tania, we'll turn to you, and I know we've talked a lot about equipment, carbon emissions, and infrastructure and so on, but you see that legacy is a much broader subject with going beyond just the physical to look at a more behavioural dimension. So tell us more about that.
Okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you. And I ask patience from you all as it's new, it's a work in progress. So I will share with you some initial work and ideas that we are developing. So legacy, what we are talking about, I think this is the first question. We are in the debate of legacy today, definitely a few steps behind what we are for sustainability. When we talk about legacy, we have different understanding, different people see it in a different way. We have definitely a lack of a common understanding and the need to start debating more. So the creation of this legacy focus unit inside the IOC, it's part of the same process of change of the Agenda 2020, and we are going now through a process of consultation, of debate with different stakeholders, first to precise what collectively we want to do on legacy, and then we need to give further steps to structure this in a more how to manage, how to do the governance of legacy in a more structured way. So the way ahead, it's really, we have a lot to do. So just to start by saying that legacy today, there is the more visible side that people usually mean, basically the urban transformation. We talk, for example, about the train in Nagano. That was an innovation for how Japan developed the high-speed train. So the games in Nagano had an important part to accelerate this, or the transformation that came, for example, in Vancouver with the liaison from the airport to the city that didn't have with before the games, or the changes in Barcelona, or the port area in Rio. This is what more known, or the post-use of games venues. Everyone is looking for venues, what they are happening. But there are some other less visible but as important side of legacy. That is what we would call the human legacy. And here, as we're talking about innovation, there is a very important part of innovation that are legacy from the games. Just to give one example for you, broadcast. A lot of innovation we have in the world of broadcast. TV comes first for the Olympic Games because of the precision, the quality you need. So it's a less known part, and there is the human side as well. I was discussing with the broadcast company of the IOC. They have already formed a lot of young people for broadcast as broadcast professionals since the 80s, and it's a program that really gives focus on employability and training and access to a very dynamic market for young people around the world. This is just one example that we could look at how this type of project could really be leveraged and make spread out to other organizations. Or on design and visual arts. There's something very interesting. I love that story. I don't know if you like it. But who here knows where the P sign, blue and white, that sign of parkings everywhere in the world, where it comes from. You don't know who invented this? Antwerp Games, the Olympic Games in Antwerp. So it was the first time because we need to communicate to anyone. Or the sign for toilets. Female, male, it came from Japan, from Olympic Games. So there is a lot of innovation on word pictures and communication that comes with the games that we don't know about. Also on behavior change. I can't not think about the refugee team these past games in Rio and the importance of showing a different face, the side of the performance, the human side of refugees in a world that is passing through what we are passing now. So it prepared people maybe to see what's happening today with different eyes, to see refugees with a different eyes, and this is important. It's a type of legacy as well that we need to learn how to manage better, to multiply and to communicate. As well as women participation in sports, how it can help on gender issues around the world. So the agenda is really broad. I could give 100 examples, but I don't have time. And the important here is to look as well at the challenges and opportunities. And as I don't have time, just to put this for discussion, I think there are 4 big challenges, but where we can also find opportunities. First is integration. How we can design the operation, not just the venues, yes, but also the operations for the 16 plus 12 days of competitions with legacy in mind, how it can be better integrated from the start. And then we need to go up there to the pre-candidature phase and think why I'm doing this for the games and how it can be used for the future. The other part is governance, and then how we can build resilience against changes in governance. Because we can have a wonderful legacy plan. If the government change, if you have political turmoil, and I lived through a big political turmoil in this last year of preparation of the games in Rio, how you can build governance and management to build resilience and keep legacy going even when you have political change. Timing. Can you, it's interesting because we were just discussing here with a colleague from Japan on how to measure impact and legacy. And it's true that we can measure, we can talk about impact 3 years after the games, but we cannot talk about legacy 3 years after. It's too soon, and people want to measure and decide if there was a legacy or not a month to a year after. We need time for legacy. So we need to have a different, we need to start building legacy before deciding to apply for a games, but we can only measure it in a very long term. So we have a huge issue here of timing, because we plant the seeds that we will only see the results, I think, with the 20 years distance here, and this is difficult as well for communication. Honestly with you, we're very bad at communicating legacy. We need to improve on that. So these, I think, are the 4 areas that we need to concentrate for improvement: integration, governance, timing.
Thank you very much, Tania. So we'll turn now to Neil, and I know you are very keen to talk about innovation and looking at new ways of doing things.
So, hello everybody, honored to be here to both of you, and thanks for the organization. Innovation, for those of you who wouldn't have been there a couple of years ago, 2 years ago at the first forum, it took place at the Stade de France. Stade de France, our opening and final game of the Euro. Who would have thought somebody from UEFA would be standing in front of you today, former sustainability manager, former Euro responsible for ISO 2012-1, talking about sustainability. I wouldn't have thought. I didn't think about it when I was working there in knowledge management, and then decided to innovate. How do you innovate? Well, you innovate through shaking models, existing models. So we're talking about legacy, but actually my aim is to break the sustainability legacy in sports. Of course, we have to build upon what is existing, but I'm getting bored, the new generation is getting bored about waste management. Why do we even speak about waste management in sport when we should actually think about circular economy? It's a lot more sexy, it does the same result and even goes beyond a mixed model. So I think there's models to change. Of course, we should not put to the bin, let me use this term, what has been done in the past, but we have to innovate, we have to think about signage. Signage, do we just reduce it? Do we mitigate the impact, or do we actually use it for roofing, construction, road building, like we did at the Euro? Do we try to compost waste coming from food, or do we actually think that this food, which of course will be excellent, can be redistributed? So, I will look at your events in the future, and having done that at the Euro, I know it can be done, and there will be no excuse for not redistributing your food waste, because if we did it at the scale of the Euro, if Roland Garros did it, and NHL did it before us, you inspired us, everybody can do it, and these are the things which we want to bring in innovation, because we have liability. The world indeed is watching us. There's an opportunity not just to think, well, an event has an impact, let's work on making it positive, but also showing an example to the world. Other example, public transport. Well, if you go to Switzerland, what is more to do in public transport? If we organize an event there, the Youth Olympic Games, potentially other Olympic Games in 2026, but we can actually jump steps. One example, smart mobility. If I go to Alan and say, well, look at public transport in the US, and he says, well, time we build the infrastructure to get there, what can we do? Well, I talk to him and say, well, let's jump a step. Let's talk about carpooling. Let's talk about taxi sharing. Let's talk about bus sharing. This is jumping a step and saying, well, tomorrow we can build an app like Uber, which responds very quickly to the next step, to the innovation, and we can influence both the industry or get influenced by the industry, and this is what we did. Tried to do at the Euro for the first time, bringing an app, an Uber type, a sharing economy type of app, in order to get this new generation on board, in order not just to say, well, if you have your ticket, you can take public transport, fine, you will be with other fans, but actually selling them something, or even for free, sorry, a tool which helped them to get to the stadiums with their friends, sharing a car, or sharing other means of transport. Another example of how we can jump a step, say, well, are we going to build solar panels on new stadiums, new infrastructure? If we talk about legacy, we want to use existing infrastructure. Well, okay, this might take a few years. Nobody can today tell me as an excuse we cannot purchase 100% of renewable energy. The price has dropped for any type of event, whether it's a mega sport event or a smaller event. Purchasing 100% of renewable energy with the market price so interesting right now is jumping a step. So this is not about building solar panels. Of course, we need to continue and foster innovation in that field. Another one, reminding myself, if you're coming before an event, positive impact or not. One example, if we build stadiums, we were focusing on mitigating, going down in our consumption, energy, water, waste, whatsoever. There's examples of stadiums now becoming power plants to the neighborhood. I mean, this is an example of actually creating added value, and for me, this is the way we need to go. Energy optimization, energy, I've talked about it. Sustainable sourcing. I'm getting bored of contract standards, sustainability criteria. Of course, legally, we're strong. We're showing the example. We signed the UN Global Compact. Fine on paper, fine in practice. However, when you go deep into detail, you need to see that we have to go way further in order to ensure that our supply chain doesn't just sign a contract, gets the bid, pushes for an overall sustainability strategy, but that on site, within its supply chain, is responsible. So really, these are some of the keywords we're working on. We want you all to work with us. I do think and as an event organizer in the past, that there's only one way, it's collaboration. There's no place for egos, there's no place for political games. Sustainability needs to open doors. I'm happy to share my sustainability management system, Manual for ISO 2012-1, the life cycle assessment. If we don't do that, we won't save the planet by ourselves, but only together at least we will have contributed. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Neil, and also a very generous offer of all the knowledge sharing. And if we pull yours, and Garry with all the Formula One, we're getting a bit further somewhere to collect all this information. But that is one thing, actually. One thing is sharing information, but it's also distributing it. That's a big challenge. Tania, you sort of alluded to it, but through your challenges of integration, governance, timing, communications, and maybe this is the other side of the coin, but not really to all of you, what do you really think are the big barriers that are preventing so many events and sports organisations actually achieving legacy or getting onto that pathway? But Niclas, you start as you are sort of from an outside perspective on that.
Just because I'm sitting on this chair, okay. No, I think there are quite a lot of barriers, and I think it is, it really starts with awareness, and I think all of us are in the room, we're here for a reason, because we have some understanding of what this is about and why it is necessary to have sustainability in sports. I also think that all of us, when we come home to our organization, will find that many of our colleagues that we need to get on board, they don't actually understand what we're talking about. So, I talked earlier about we need to be able to tell our sports audience about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So that is important, but the first step before that is to be able to get on board our colleagues who maybe do not have the understanding or the interest of this. And I think that is really the first barrier to address. I leave the other ones to Tania.
And while the time is speaking, if anyone's got a question, please raise your hand. The microphone is there.
I think the mindset is behind all the other challenges and barriers we have. It's to get people on board, but as well to think long-term is very, very difficult. We already have, for example, in an event like Olympic Games, we had a cycle of 7 years to prepare, plus 2 years before for the candidacy. So we're talking about before the candidacy, there's some work to decide to go for it or not, 10 years. When we add the legacy perspective, we need to think 20 years in the future. And this is a big challenge for many of us, for many of the colleagues. So it is the delivery the next day, and when you approach the event, it's the pressure for delivering the operation. It's very, very big. So how can you keep the delivery, the excellence in the delivery, and at the same time get people to think about the long term? So I think integration, you have many barriers that comes from mindset, but also from the time frame people work, the demands on operations. So really there's a need of put some structure, some management, some tools, and some education. I think this is the main point. Some education around legacy and how it can be integrated. For governance, the barriers are many. I think the first one still related to this timing, the timing of governments that you change every 5 years, 4 years, depending on the country you are. How you can make this not a government issue, but really a state policy that will keep consistent, and how you can get all the stakeholders on the table to decide. How can you get the community listen before you even think about putting the candidature? I think there are some good examples, and I think about the project of Vancouver Legacy now that started even before the candidature to talk with the different communities and plan legacy in a dialogue with the society. So it's very much needed. dialogue with society to build a games project that is meaningful on the legacy and carry on through all the time and have a specific governance that will resist the time and the pressure from political change. So yeah, these are the main ones, but I think if we keep thinking here, other barriers will come. But, and of course you have financial issues and how you can budget for, it's always a trade-off. If you look at, will I construct, I will reduce my budget for construction and then spend a lot to do the reconversion, or I will build and then there will be the problem of the cost of the initial building, thinking about legacy. So these are other issues that need to be very well thought through in the beginning of the process. So I think as early as possible is the key. So dialogue, collaboration, and really start early in the process. If you want to put legacy at the end, it's very difficult to make it work.
In fact, your mention of Vancouver's legacies now is an interesting one, because and if you remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the subtleties of that was to show you actually get good benefits as you go along. It's not about legacies, just some mythical thing in 30 years. You've got to sort of keep people interested by contemporary benefits as well as trying to achieve the long-term gains. So, Neil.
Okay, don't think I will come back on the governance issue. I think the IOC is a good example on how to bridge the gap between various events, actually building their own team within. I had the chance to be both within UEFA and within the LOC, so working on the Euro, so to ensure that we would keep the knowledge. So talking about knowledge, there's intangible knowledge. I think, well, okay, I can share all my documents. There's tangible knowledge. There's somebody like David. Hopefully he will live as long as possible, but you know, we got to maintain somebody like David who puts at the table UEFA, the IOC, the World Economic Forum. This for me is an example of legacy. How do we manage to capture that knowledge, to share that knowledge, to transmit that knowledge? So whether it is censor or not, I am also working on this aspect. I want to talk about it tomorrow, you will know more, but there needs to be a movement. There needs to be a place where existing bases, the French, the Americans, sit down, share their cultural differences, work together in order to ensure there is a legacy through sports, and not just a legacy, as I said before, but there's innovation coming from science, coming from the NGOs. But I also agree that from the top, we need strong policies, we need strong regulations in order to ensure that we comply to them, but also the countries comply to them. Otherwise, as you know, first we might not take the train, but we would actually be more comfortable in taking the plane to get there as a method as well.
Okay. Now, I think we've got, who's got the microphone? Will you use it? Whoever's got the microphone, Anna then. I might guess.
Last night at dinner, there were about 5 or 6 of us who kind of sustainability experts, and we said if we were evaluating the bids of the Olympic, what would be the most important criteria? And the conclusion was legacy. And you just said something I think is incredibly important, which is that legacy takes decades, or could take decades, but it certainly takes many years. My comment to you is that I don't think that is how it is understood by the public. I think that everybody understands the multi-year planning that needs to take place in advance of an Olympics, and all the infrastructure and other logistical and operational issues that need to move forward. But there is this perception, correct me if I'm wrong, that somehow once the Olympics are over, the legacy is immediately visible. And what you're pointing out, which I think is enormously important, is that no, actually, legacy is a continuous, continued process of infrastructure development. So what happens you get an article like last week's New York Times article, which could be seen as, if you understood legacy in the way you're offering it, you could have seen those underdeveloped locations as the first stage or the early stages of a construction development, to go forward, building on the Olympics. But instead, because the public was not educated to the fact that legacy is a multi-year endeavor, people saw it as, well, wait, those things are underdeveloped, they failed. But, maybe in 5 or 10 years, which is how long it takes to build substantial infrastructure, we may find that those areas in Rio will actually be, very well developed. So, sorry to be long-winded, I would just say that there needs to be more public communication about the fact that legacy does not happen immediately upon the conclusion of the Olympics. That it's actually something that is an ongoing process.
Thank you. Can you turn the microphone to the lady there?
I have a microphone.
Oh, you do, sorry. I didn't know it was you. Okay, sorry, please.
So, my name is François Ecclesias. I'm CSR manager at Nissan Europe, one of the proud sponsors of UEFA Champions League. I have a question to Neil. I'd like to know the role of the official sponsor in supporting you achieving your sustainability and legacy objective in the Euro 2016.
Well, it's a very good question. Even though I don't work there anymore, because I'm launching my own company, I can answer to that by, first of all, stakeholder engagement. I think we should not as well position ourselves in terms of ego, saying, oh, we can teach the sponsors and we bring them on board. Actually, we can learn a lot from them, like we can learn a lot from Dole, we can learn a lot from Coca-Cola. I was very happy that Nissan provided electric vehicles for the final in Berlin a couple of years ago, because it would have not been part at that time of our agenda. So I think sometimes the sponsors can push us. They should also challenge us in order to go further. As you may know, our sponsors, depending on the sponsors, we went further than others. One example is Française des Jeux. We pushed us to go towards ISO 26000 that they're putting in place. With Coca-Cola, you know better than I, their sustainability initiatives. And with other sponsors who were not putting sustainability at the top of the agenda, we didn't go as far. I know that I work quite a lot with the sponsors. I know that this is becoming integrated. As much as before we were thinking and looking at the supply chain, there needs to be a moment where there's a reflection on how do we sign with partners. We should align ourselves as strict as we are with our supply chain towards our partners. It's not as easy as that because they give us money, we pay services to our suppliers. But this is a work I had started doing, which was accepted at a senior level within UEFA to start as well challenging our partners, because in the end they represent the image of our event, whether it's a positive image like Nissan or whether it's a debatable image. This still needs to be looked at before we engage with sponsors, learning from them or sometimes challenging them as well. But it's an opportunity to actually be sitting at some debatable sponsors table to bring that topic. One example, Elon Musk, he says, are you going to continue working with Trump? He says, if I don't, the topic is not brought at the table. So do I step out or do I stay in? And I think this is a strong message and a strong item to think about.
Who's got a microphone now? If you've got the microphone,
yeah, I have the microphone. So sorry. Norman Fossman from the Philadelphia Eagles NFL team. But so kind of a follow-up to Alan, I would like to know, in your words, what you think can be done to create a lasting legacy. When you have incredible resources that come in America, it's Super Bowl, right? They come in with just an armada of resources, teams, money, Olympic Games, World Cup, right? We deal with Live Nation, things like that. Coming from the stadium side, those resources come in, they're incredible, and then they leave. So what do you think can be done, especially in third world countries, to actually create a lasting legacy, right? Is it in the sector of education? You know, do you supply actual folks, resources, people? But what can be done so that there can be something in 10 years, in 15 years, where a stadium, a venue, or a whole city can say, here, this is, you know, look, they came in, and we've created something here, right? And in a city like Munich, it's easy, there's a lot of money, but what do you do in South Africa? What do you do in other places in the world?
I'll just give two examples that are on the intangible legacy. So we go explore a little bit. I think partnership, collaboration, not delivering alone just for the games what you can deliver in partnership. And here I will give two examples. The first one is on climate change, the project that Rio 2016 did with Dow. Legacy was the starting point. Every time Nicolita came to us with a project, we would look at, and I think the best example is a project to restore degraded pasture. So at the beginning they had some projects, and we asked them, so what do we have for cattle? Because we know that cattle is a big contributor to climate change globally, but for Brazil and Latin America, Brazil, Argentina together, it's huge. So we need to do something. We cannot do innovation for climate change without dealing with cattle in Brazil. And if we want to go South America with Argentina, there's something we need to do there. And they came with this project that is for calculate. First, there is an innovation on how you calculate the carbon that is saved through restoration of degraded pastures. Then there was a perception, a mindset problems, because the big farmers, and these are hectares of cattle, they don't have they don't think about doing the restoration, they just move the cattle to another area, and there is deforestation, everything that comes. If you can restore the degraded pasture, from one side you avoid direct emissions by capturing the soil, but you're also avoiding direct emissions by moving the frontier of deforestation. So it was an interesting work. They took one of the biggest producers of cattle in Brazil, group, and they were the pilot. And they implemented, they had even economic benefits of improved productivity by having a better pasture, and they can convince the others. And this guy only was interested because he loves sports, and for him was the possibility to be part of the Olympic Games in Brazil. And now there is a continuation. But if we work it on our own, just buying credits, it will be great. Yes, we could have supported a project somewhere, but we would not change the way the producers of cattle in Brazil think about restoration of pasture. It's just one example. Partnership was key with Dow, but also with this huge group. I think it's one of the 3 biggest in the west of Brazil for cattle production. And I think on education as well, we have some examples of partnerships, and I think working collaboration is key, because you cannot create legacy if you based only in a temporary organization. You need to reach out, and another example I will give is to work with developing small and middle enterprises, that instead of doing this the organizing committee itself, it was a partnership with an agency that takes care of small enterprises and help them to develop, to improve competitiveness. They were not giving the entrance as part of the supply chain just by having a quota. That would be an impact. But when you think about competitiveness and improvement of quality, then you move on to legacy. So I think sometimes it's just small twists on how you do things to create the legacy.
Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, sorry, 2 quick items. You might have seen I love to shake models, legacy, infrastructure building. why not just think, do we really need new infrastructure? For those of you who don't know the Euro 2020 model, it's going to be played in 13 countries, developing countries, less developing countries, developed countries. Why? Is because we want to utilize existing infrastructure. There will only be 2 new stadiums built. I think if you look at the overall life cycle assessment or carbon footprint on an event, of course transport is high, but way above is building new infrastructure. So if we don't need them, we don't need to build them. And I think that's also a new way of thinking, rather than going in a country and saying, oh, we will help you build roads, we will help you build airports, well, actually, a lot of it is already existing, and knowing future bidding city for 2026, this is the new model they will put forward, which I think makes sense and is actually relevant to the discussion.
No. Have you got the microphone?
My name is
something maybe afterwards because we're not
Niclas.
Sorry. Can I first? Because, yeah, sorry. I'm Asian, working for Delegate Sports. Actually, almost answered my question because I thought about building legacy, when we talked about innovation, and it always bears some risk, right? It might not work. So, don't you think that it might be also a challenge, rather to innovate and to try find new ways, new structures, to shape structures, models, to use existing ones and rather develop them efficiently than always to try to find a new world, so to say.
Thank you. So let's just get your question now.
Thank you so much. Also, thank you very much to the panel. My name is Franka Bosma. I'm working for the South Pole Group, and we're developing carbon offset projects in developing countries that have a very strong link to the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's my question to the panel. I feel that you need a language or a framework for what you understand as legacy. So I was talking to colleagues, making it tangible, maybe also sparking innovation. So question to all of you, what room do you see for using the Sustainable Development Goals as a framework?
First of all, we really enjoy the match between the microphones here. So. On the sustainable development goals, I think it's an absolute essential part of this. You know, I come from an organization that is strongly focused on climate change, but for us, the Paris Agreement goes hand in hand with the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. And I think also, you know, there are some very good examples of how you can build the legacy, you know, at the local level, from an international perspective, you know, with the focus on projects on climate change. I know in Rio, both for the World Cup and for the Olympics, we saw actually a little bit of a disconnect in some cases where you have the international committee was doing great things. The local committees and local governments did great things, and we saw they didn't really talk so much with each other as you would like them to be. And I don't think because it was a lack of will, but I think they saw that the communications goes to the top tier that doesn't really have the awareness about why it's important to go together. And to try to answer, to respond to your question there, the government of Brazil had some really, really good offsetting and climate action projects in Brazil that they were really building a whole model to support different kind of climate mitigation activities and climate adaptation activities. I think at the international level, what we saw, but this is also an issue of, you know, sometimes you wish there were more transparency about these things, that we had climate action that was global, which was good. And from the climate perspective, it doesn't matter if you have action at the local or global level, but for the local audience, it really matters. It really matters to be able to sell this, if you like, to build the foundation for the legacy, to say that here is something that is benefiting my country, my life situation, my daily life. And in Brazil also, I think we saw some infrastructure development like the bus rapid transport system, some renewable energy facilities that were built there. That was very good examples here. So yeah, I think, and I don't know, maybe that's responding to your question a little bit also. I think, you know, that you can't do climate without sustainable development issues that are related to the local audience. You have to have that connection.
Just to answer your question, we're currently developing a framework for legacy at the IOC, and we are doing in the initial phases of consultation. And the framework, it starts with 4 main references. One is the Sustainable Development Goals. The second one is the Agenda 2020 and the vision of the Olympic movement. The third one is the city vision for legacy, what they want before they even think, why do I want to host this event? And the fourth one is society expectations. So legacy needs to be built on the basis of these 4 elements, and we look with attention at the SDGs. By its mission, the Olympic Games already, Michelle helped me here with the numbers, the Olympic movement already addresses 5, just by its core mission, but if we put on the top of that the sustainability strategy that has been recently approved, plus the legacy approach that's under development, we move from 5 to 12 of the 17 that we can collaborate. So it's definitely a very important part of what we are doing.
So actually what Tania points out is a very important message, is that we cannot, as an event organizer or an institution, we cannot comply to all 17. We have different priorities. It is not our first goal. Our first goal is to align ourselves on the UN, on the IOC strategy, and this is a work I was doing as well at UEFA at the time, and now which we want to push as well further with SANSI. I don't think the UN or the IOC can put NASCAR to the table. I don't think it's their target or their goal. We have no boundaries. However, of course, we need to align ourselves on their strategies and then decline and spread the message in order to play a part of the game in ensuring that those SDGs, the IOC strategy, reaches out way further than we could have thought.
Thank you. Now, has someone got the microphone on this side? No, that's you. You go for it.
Enrique Zaragoza. I have been writing about sport and sustainability and blogging since 2013. I have a question for Tania Braga. In the Olympic Games, there are more and more sporting events. That means more sporting venues. Everybody knows what's the problem with the sporting venues after the Games. The last year we have golf for 2020. There are also more sporting events in the agenda. Do you think that is that sustainable strategy for the Olympic Committee to have more and more sporting events? What does it mean for the legacy? And what was the problem with the sporting venues from Rio? Because last week we read in the newspapers in Germany that there are some problems with some venues. Thank you.
Okay, starting with the issue of more events. First of all, it's important to understand that there was a change with Agenda 2020, and the first games that will be fully aligned with this is the 24 games, because we have the whole difference in the cycle of planning candidacy, and it has to be put at the beginning of the process. But now it's the number of events, and it doesn't mean that there is a limitation for the number of events, not just for the number of sports, and not always more events means more venues. You can combine different events in same venues. You can go for existing venues, and this is a tendency that is even bigger. And you mentioned the venues in Rio. I will give you an information here that very few people know, although we try to send this information out. We measure in square meters for Rio venues. How much the percentage you think was in square meters for existing venues in Rio? Try a guess.
Not too much, because you have staying for the athletics, for South America Athletics Championship. I don't know exactly.
So the existing venues was 71% of the footage. 12% new build and 17 fully temporary. So the construction was small. Another aspect interesting, I saw the same pictures you saw last week, and I received at the same day from a friend pictures he took at the same place. But he took the pictures with some places where there were new trees, new equipment for kids, new equipment for people to do the practice. But there was this venue, the Aquatic Center, that is being dismantled, that were in the bad pictures. So you have the two at the same place. But what goes out is just a picture of the things that are being dismantled. So the half of the story is told. And this is a problem in communication, because we have difficulties to see the gray zones. We want white or black. Either is perfect or is nothing. And we're not doing a good job, when I say to communicate, to show the balance. That are things that are not yet resolved and they need to be solved, but there are things that are going well, but they are never shown. So we need to find a way to establish a more balanced view, that it's not either black or white. You have gray zones, you need to navigate through them and try to make things better while dealing with that. But in Rio, what happened? There was a huge political crisis on federal level, but also in the municipal level there was a change of government that was quite extreme with the new mayor, and there is a lack of governance now that things need to be developed. But we need to remember that it's still in the phase of dismantling. So many of these venues are being dismantled and it takes time. For example, in London, the whole Olympic Park was closed for a year or two, David, for the transition.
They reopened part of it within about 9 months.
9 months.
Then there was a successive phase of transition of some of the venues. So probably it took about 2 years to get the complete park open. But it was always intended that there would be an early reopening as soon as possible, at least part of it. So the thing about it is not something that just is a quick transition. It's a long transition period, and you'll get the London Olympic Park continues to be developed, and it will do for another decade or more. So we always said it was a 10-year project to put on the games. It was a 30-year regeneration project.
I just came back from Barcelona, where they celebrated 25 years, and there is new development. They try to find new use for the venues still today. So it's a constant work.
I think, Tania, you've got a fascinating job here. As well as, obviously, we've got the contemporary aftermath of Rio, and before we blink, we'll be on to Pyeongchang, 2018 Winter Games, and so on. But part of your role going to look back at, the Athens, the Barcelonas, and the Sydneys, and maybe even as far as Antwerp, and try and capture some of the past benefits, which have taken a few decades or many years to come to fruition, and somehow build a new narrative around the longer term perspective.
To make it short? Yes.
Good. That's good to know. Do we have any more? Yes.
Yeah, my name is Andreas Klages, representing the German Olympic Sports Confederation. So thank you to all of you for coming to Germany, and thanks to the organizing committee for picking Munich as a location, and to my fellow delegate colleague in that row, don't believe everything what you read in German newspapers. However, I want to highlight that thing, Tania, if I got it right, you said that we, or the IOC, or the sport organizations, have to improve communicating the positive examples of legacy, the positive examples and approaches of sustainability, and I would fully agree to that. However, do we also at the same time have to improve communicating the bad examples, the critical points, the situations where it hurts? If I look, and I also include my own organization in that, at our websites, I only read the good examples, the good stories. And so we also, only if we organizations discuss the critical aspects, for example, the huge environmental impact of such, to our understanding, in our analysis, then we are enabled to highlight the positive examples of Vancouver or London. And right now it's a black and white storytelling, to my understanding. And this is very crucial as far as the public opinion is concerned, because the media only highlight the bad examples, we only highlight the good examples, and this gap is just too big. And hopefully with the new strategy of the IOC, that will also get an impulse from there, but I think this is a crucial point.
Thank you very much, Andre. That's something you see a lot in the corporate world as well, of trying to get the tone right between, well, it's effectively around credibility, isn't it?
Sorry if I may, just to unload Tania. Yeah, well, put yourself in my shoes when the first time I went to France and say, you know, I'm UEFA, I want to talk about sustainability. They looked at me and said, what? You know, and there's Maya there. You know, he was thinking, God knows, you know. So my approach was to say, we want to do better, we want to progress. So of course, going towards more sustainable. When Jacques Lambert went to COP21 to speak in the negotiation area, he said, we failed on the Combi Ticket initiative in France due to these reasons. I invite you to read our report, which actually points all our failures and areas of improvement. And this is why, as a Swiss organization in a certain way, we got accepted by the French, because from the very first day we said, UEFA, on these points, we need to improve, where honestly, maybe we did it better in the past, it's going to be more difficult here, but I think that's how we manage to gain credibility, by saying we're aiming to progress, and these are our weakest points. And then it's up to everybody, the media, the specialists, the experts like you guys, to judge the work we did and how to help us to make it better in the future.
Okay, may comment something, because it's right, it's black and white, it's about the tone in the messaging and how we communicate things. Now, because we're in Munich, as you know, people compare sports to other sectors, what you're doing. Those of you who flew here should know that the Munich airport is climate neutral. Those of you who went to Deutsche Bahn, you would have had an opportunity to buy a climate neutral ticket. Those of you who are working, going here by car, should know that by 2030 you're not allowed to buy a fossil-fueled car in Germany, or the same thing in most Scandinavian countries. Now that is disruptive, transformative change. If we are coming and saying, well, we're going to improve, you know, like 20-30% here and there, it's not going to be newsworthy. And I think what Michel said earlier today is that you need a bottom up. I mean, everything we're doing here is good and it deserves to be highlighted. You also need the top down to really drive this, and that is certainly coming from the Paris Agreement. But I think there's a space in between there where we can aspire higher than what we are doing today. We did say it's going to happen in our lifetime. We are going to go to climate neutral. I think that is really where we should put the targets to be heard.
Are you talking about science-based targets?
No, I'm not talking about science-based targets. I'm talking, well, I mean, it is related to the science as telling us that we have to go climate neutral by the second half of the century. There is no option, and we all have to contribute to that. But science-based targets is also, you know, an initiative by a number of research institutes that are sort of apportioning how much your climate footprint can be. We think that you need really to go the full way, and at least put up there, recognizing that you may not be able to go the full way immediately, but at least saying that at a certain time point, that is our aspiration, we will be there.
Okay. So we are almost at 1 o'clock, and I thought I heard the rumble of stomachs and people needing to get a lunch, so I think we'll draw this one to a close. I think it's been a really great discussion, and thank you all three of you for your detailed answers and reflections on this, and also for some really good questions.